Hi everybody. So I wrote the last few lines of the story that I was working on, The Last Dance. I have been thinking about it all morning, and it means that I have a rough draft for my next book finished. All of the stories are complete, and yet I know that a lot more is going to be going into it in the editing process. It had 6 stories. The stories do come to a close, come full circle at the end, but then there's pieces in between that are missing because it's one story from one year in the character's life, and then another story in the next year, and then the next year. When I finished the story that I was working on this morning, where the story went made sense when I wrote those lines that I wrote early this morning, when I wrote up those paragraphs, and I didn't know I would be ending the story today, this morning. The character's journey in that particular part of his life, something comes full circle without me giving too much away. Something sort of comes full circle in the character's arc, in his journey, and then I wrote up the line that just kind of sums up everything from that story, and then it dawned on me, this is the end. I'm not going to give away any particular details, but the stories come from stories from my life, and so the particular story that I had been working on, that I just finished, Last Dance, would be my senior year of high school, and a lot of the things that people struggle through in their senior year, trying to get into college, SATs, which this takes place in a fantasy world, so they're not called the SATs, they're called something different, but SATs, prom, graduation, senior skip day, and I thought it would all end with the character graduating high school. That it seemed to make sense. And I had a lot of ideas for this particular story, of things that happened to me in my senior year that I would put into the story. But then I kept moving with the character and with where he should go emotionally, and where it ended, it seemed like, if I continued, then it wouldn't be necessary to show it. I ended on an upbeat not that upbeat, sort of bittersweet, but I know in my mind that in the anthology that the next story that comes is Orion's Jet Lessons, and in that story the loose ends of the previous story are tied together. But I just wonder, when I look back in the draft, I don't know if I'll add another chapter, or what, to fill in the gaps, or if I'll just leave the stories as they are. I want to talk a little bit about the origins of this anthology and of the entire book series. All of these stories were written out of order. It started with the two novels, Orien, Battle to Fog Devils, and Orien in the League of Artists. But it was a completely different story in the beginning, and a completely different world for a completely different audience. I didn't really know the audience. I was still learning. I didn't know what I was doing. Here's the original book, which I self-published when I was 24, and the world that I had come up with was a sort of fairy tale world with fantasies and castles, and I didn't know whether I was writing for middle school age or high school age, and this was a problem in other stories that I've written, especially my first novel, quote unquote, which was terribly offensive and utter crap. It's not available anywhere. Don't go looking for it. Some people have it. If you bought it, burn it, because it's not. Just burn it. So here's the opening lines of Orien Battles the Fog Devils, rough draft. Worlds beyond the stars are often a favorite subject in many fictions and fantasies. For those who have minds wide enough to dream so big, such a place as Promethea, a tiny rock in space, is so much more. I can tell it to you, and tell of the blue sapphire oceans, or the trees and hills so green that the land shines like an emerald. And I will have taken you to a land once ravaged by disaster, turned into utopia by man, a land colonized by earth settlers, where its council of kings and queens governs the land. Now you can see in that last line about the council of kings and queens governing the land, that if you've read the later final story that would be published, this one, completely rewritten, then you can see a complete difference. The character of Orien became a reflection of myself. It became more autobiographical. With this story, Orien in the League of Artists. And then, from there, I decided I didn't know if I was going to do a sequel or rewrite the first one or what. I was taking a walk. I took a walk to the bank, which is around where I work, so it's a couple of miles from my apartment. I was taking a walk to the bank just to take a walk to get the fresh air, and I needed to deposit my paycheck. I think this might have been around the time before we had direct deposit. I don't know, but I was going for a walk thinking about the story, where to go. I had an idea of an anthology of short stories that would talk about the character's history that I had created, the things that were hinted at in Orien in the League of Artists, about the fact that the character can't drive a jet car. They have jet cars in this fantasy world, by the way. The character can't drive a jet car because I don't know how to drive, and I would tell the story about how I tried to learn to drive, and because of distractions, problems with focusing, might have been ADHD or Asperger's or whatever, that when I was learning to drive, I didn't learn, it just didn't work for me. I wanted to tell that story, and then I got home and started, but I started with this very detailed intro where the character is going on a walk. He's just finished high school, late learning, doesn't know what to do with his life, going on this walk, and this is where he eventually comes to the confusion. I gotta learn to fly a jet car so I can get out of here, get out of the confinement that I find myself in this cottage in the middle of nowhere, where my friends are far away and there's not much for me to do. But then I decide that the character is working on a play, and then he decides to get this play made. And so I end up having two plots going on. I have the character learning to fly jet car and learning to get his play made, or trying to get his play made. And that story became Orien's Jet Lessons, and it felt very much grounded in that time in my life. It didn't have like the references to the fairy tale world, the Council of Kings and Queens. It was more grounded in the same world that Orien and the League of Artists was grounded in. And so that's when I decided that I had to go back and fix those other stories. I had to create a set of rules for that world and stick to it. And then I would continue to write stories to go into that anthology. And the next story I wrote was The Border, starting from the beginning, is before the art school, and a story that happened at that time in my life, where a member of my brother's band was living in our garage. I decided to, I'll do an Orien story about something like that happens. You know, his brother is also in a band, a member of his band is living in the attic, you know, and then tell a story from there and tell it in the same way that I told Orien's Jet Lessons, as multiple chapters, like a pulp story from the days of when the pulp magazine stories were very popular, you know, that type of story. And then after The Border was written, that's when I came back to Orien Battles the Fog Devils. The sun's light and warmth came and went with the wisps of the clouds in the sky of plant Promethea during the season of harvest, and the fallen foliage on the dirt paths of the Angeline village resembled that of Earth, Promethea's ancestral planet. It had been many years since the colonization of the Land of Promise. The Council of Kings and Queens and all that is gone, and I'm writing for a much older, more mature audience with the revised version. And so after that came the stories Orien's First Kiss and Top Scholar and Last Dance, which is the one that I just finished. And I had a particular plan that I was going by of what order in which I would write these stories. And as I've said, the stories were written out of order. There's a quote by the pulp author Robert E. Howard, who created the character of Conan the Barbarian. In writing these yarns, I've always felt less as creating them than as if I were simply chronicling his adventures as he told them to me. That's why they skip around so much, without following a regular order. The average adventurer, telling tales of a wild life at random, seldom follows any ordered plan, but narrates episodes widely separated by spaces and years as they occur to him. That pretty much sums it up for me. And I'm publishing these stories independently for everyone to read. You can get them on my website. You can get them on Amazon.com. And the series is basically a work in progress still, although you can read the books. And I try to do everything I can to make them complete, to make everything complete, to work hard when I go through the editing process, as I'm going to be starting to do. And I will keep everybody posted on the progress of the editing of each story through these vlogs, video logs, video journal, whatever you want to call it. I'll keep posting little logs like this just to keep to chronicle the editing process, and then it will be ready to be published.